it's Uncle Kerman here, and today I'm doing an orbit tutorial for people who don't know how to get into orbit. For the beginner player, and I'm going to recommend the rockets that are in the stock list, that the rocket that you first should get into orbit to, that you should practice with. I really recommend the Kerbal X. It's the one I started with, and it's really like easy to fly. So I really recommend the Kerbal X for beginner players. Today I'm doing live commentary. That means I am talking while playing, not talking in post-production. Once you're skilled enough and have gotten into orbit, you can try taking this to Minimus, to the moon or Minimus. Minimus actually takes less delta V because it's to land on and return because it's smaller, at least I think. But you can also take it to the moon. It's also the first thing I landed on Minimus, the moon, or Duna. Usually using a bit of cheats for Duna. Always using a bit of cheats for Duna. But let's go ahead and launch this thing. So yeah, let it load. I always hate when I'm playing KSP and it takes a lot to load. Sometimes I'm launching and it just freezes, the screen freezes. So you click the bottom stage and see the TWR reading. We're gonna be looking at that. You press T or just click the button for SAS. It helps stabilize your rocket and keep it where you want it going. Z and X are for throttle up and throttle down, or for full throttle up or full throttle down. And shift and control are for slow throttle up and slow throttle down. So my launch routine is usually T, Z, and space. And then while launching, you keep the TWR reading at about between 1.4 and 1.5. You see that? And you press D to go with the rotation of Kerbin in your gravity turn. Once one runs out of fuel, you decouple, and there you have it. And you do your gravity turn. Just keep on gravity turning and get to the 90 mark or 45 degrees by 10 kilometers. Up there here you can see your altitude. So by now I should be going there. And by 5 kilometers, you keep it between 45 and 55 TWR, 145 and 155 TWR. And see, I just throttled a little bit down. Of course, because I've been playing KSP for a long time, getting to orbit is practically second nature to me. But once you get to like about 10 kilometers, you just leave it running until your apoapsis height over here gets to 10 kilometers. Not 10 kilometers, 80 kilometers. Up here, you will probably not have the numbers up here because I have Kerbal Engineer Redux installed, which is a mod that I could barely live without. But for the people that don't have Kerbal Engineer Redux, you see what your apoapsis height over here. So you just keep it running. I'm just gonna press shift a little to accelerate it a little more. And as you can see, here is our speed. And we're nearing 1,000 meters per second. I'm just gonna pitch up a little bit so our apoapsis can get to the desired height when we want it to. But by the time your apoapsis height gets to 50 kilometers, you should really start flying completely flat. Until your apoapsis is at 80 kilometers, your desired altitude. I do 80 kilometers because Kerbin's atmosphere ends at 70, and 80 seems like a safe altitude. You can also see your trajectory by pressing M to your map and X to cut throttle, and this is where you're basically going. This is like you can point wherever you want with this. Prograde is your nose pointing where you're heading. Retrograde is your nose pointing against where you're heading. Radial out is pointing straight up in the planetary body's perspective. Radial in, you just point straight in. Normal and anti-normal let you adjust the inclination of your orbit. So you go on to map view, and you see the apoapsis marker. You click on it and press add maneuver, and just drag. Just drag the apoapsis marker. I mean the prograde marker until your apoapsis and periapsis are balanced out in the middle. That's how you know you've got a pretty much circular orbit. You see, 80 kilometers, 80 kilometers. Perfect. And then you can point into your maneuver direction, which is where you have to point for your maneuver node burn. And a tip, like Kerbal Engineer Redux is a mod that I can't live without. It helps me know the time to my node burn, orbit, altitude, and all that good stuff. But if you don't have it installed, then you should really like take the you should like take the burn time. You see down here the burn time and divide it by 2. And when this thing gets to, like, in this case it's 4 seconds. When this thing gets to 4 seconds, we start burning. But look, I'm just pressing space, which is staging. Space is staging. I probably forgot to tell you that. Space is staging, and then space again to get the Poodle engine. G, you can extend the landing gear, but you don't have to like extend the landing gear unless you're probably gonna land on some celestial body. But then you just, so you know this works. I'm gonna show you. I turned off the Kerbal Engineer Redux, and I'm just gonna burn when this thing says 10, because 20 divided by 2 is 10. So we just now. And as you can see, our orbit line is getting further and further and further and further and further and further and further until you press X, and voila, you're in orbit. So yeah, that's how you get into orbit. How do you deorbit? That means get out and go back to Kerbin from orbit. Well, if you want to go anywhere in the Kerbin system without having to spend years at your screen, you just press full stop is accelerate time warp, which makes time go faster, and comma makes it go slower. So now, for example, if you want to get to the moon, you just make a maneuver node. You just set as target. Make a maneuver node. to where it intersects the Mun. See? And right then, if I burn there, I'm gonna perfectly intersect the Mun. If you don't get a Mun intersect right away, just drag around your maneuver node marker until you get a good Mun encounter. But back to topic, how do you deorbit from atmosphere, from space? On set target, you press here, add maneuver, and drag the retrograde marker until your periapsis disappears. Then you go to maneuver and press that button, which time warps you to 1 minute until burn. So right here, I'm just time warping. I'm gonna burn at 2.5 seconds because 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. So I'm just gonna wait until the 2.5. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, go. You don't really have to be that accurate in this because, you know, it happens. But what if you overshoot your maneuver node? You just press maneuver again. It spins you back. And once it gets to 1 meter per second, you cannot, if it's less than 1 meter per second, you cannot lock on again. But it doesn't lock onto the maneuver. But it doesn't really matter. So now we just press retrograde. We go normal. And see that? And we decouple the stage and go retrograde. And then we time warp till we hit the atmosphere. You know when you hit the atmosphere? When time warp stops. And yeah, that happens. When you're entering the atmosphere, you don't need SAS, so you can go ahead and turn it off. The blunt body design of a space capsule is designed so with no effort at all, it'll keep no effort from the spacecraft at all. It'll keep pointing blunt end first because that's how aerodynamics work. So let's time warp until we have plasma going on. So we're waiting. In atmosphere, you can only do physics warp, which accelerates time, but also includes physics and it simulates physics while in time warp. So yeah, that's a good thing in atmosphere because it needs to simulate how the thing is gonna how the atmosphere is gonna act against the vessel. You cannot time warp while burning your engine, but you can physics warp. To physics warp in space, you press Option and do the regular time warp thing. In atmosphere, you just do regular time. You just do regular time warp thing, and it'll automatically put you in physics warp. So as you can see, it's getting hot. That's what this heat shield is for. I have the reentry effects mod installed. That's why I have this reentry trail. You will not have it unless you have the mod installed. And here's our altitude here's our altitude. Because I just really like looking at the Mach number that we enter at Mach 9, and then a few minutes later we touch down at zero velocity, and it's even more extreme in real life because you're entering at Mach 25, and in 8 minutes time you're splashing down at 21 kilometers an hour. So yeah, that's really cool. So we can time warp, physics warp until until we get slow enough to deploy our parachute. We deploy our parachute how we stage normally. We just press space. Parachutes, if it's red, the parachute is gonna get shredded when you press space, or because it's gonna, it's too fast. But once it's like white, like right now, gray white, you can press space and it'll deploy perfectly. If it's yellow, it has a chance of breaking and a chance of not breaking. But look at that. I'm not in SAS, but it's staying perfectly retrograde. If I do that, it'll wiggle, but it'll still keep retrograde. So I press space and parachute deploys, and you just physics warp. Usually parachutes are set to fully open at a kilometer in altitude. So yeah, see, that's what happens. So if you're going too fast, like over 6 meters per second, you can go ahead and jettison the heat shield, and it's falling to the ocean, and you can watch it explode in the ocean, like that. You can press this to toggle nav ball, and yeah, you just physics warp till splashdown. So, and right before splashdown, I didn't have time to do that there. You turn off physics warp because there's a chance that your craft will be damaged because of physics warp. Well, that's the end of the video, guys. I hope you liked it. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. It really helps me and the channel a lot and helps me grow. Please subscribe, and see you next week. See you next video. Angel Kerman signing off.